Welcome into another edition of the Jungle Juice Podcast. It's Sam Gormley and Mick Nelson with you. Mick, good Wednesday evening. It's getting a little chilly out there. I'm not ready for that.
Happy Wednesday. Yeah, it heated up a little bit more in the Cincy area today. It was up to like the 40s, so that's acceptable. But past 2 days, they've been in the 20s, high 10s, high teens.
Yeah, I don't like it when I mean the best part about in the summer is waking up and not having to scrape off your car. And like this morning, it was one of those things. Luckily, I have remote start, so I can remote start my car, and it at least begins the process. But it's not fun having to get out there when it's 20 degrees and you're bundled up and you're trying to get to work and you're sitting there with your ice scraper trying to scrape off the excess ice. But that's the end of my rant because it's not a podcast about ice scraping. It's a podcast about the Bengals, right?
I wouldn't know your problems. I've got a garage space down here, so
yes. But you have you are married, so do you not scrape off your wife's car like a nice husband does?
I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one. I'm usually sleeping by the time she's leaving. So,
wow.
I know.
Husband of the year right there. Husband of the year for you.
I offered her to give her the parking space in the garage, but where it's at in the building, she doesn't like where it's at. It's like it's in the back corner of the garage. It's like a shared space. And then there's like big concrete pillars around every space. And she scraped her car once and she was like, I'm not parking there ever again. So
I have been in there before. It is a little scary in your garage.
Not a good garage.
No, it's not. Coming up on the show for today, we've got a big show as we welcome everyone into the Jungle Juice podcast. We're going to break down the Steelers game. We're going to ask a lot of questions about Jake Browning's performance, about the defense and the struggles that have happened over the last couple of weeks. We're going to talk a little Zach Taylor, a lot of information and a lot has been talked about with him over these last couple of weeks. We're going to dive into the Jaguars game as well, coming up on Monday Night Football in good old Jacksonville, Florida. It's another white Bengal night. We'll have our picks and so on. We want to make sure that we ask you to follow us on our social media channels. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. You can watch us on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel. Subscribe there. And also, we're streaming live on our good friend Josh Isles over WDN today. So make sure you follow him as well with that. But Mick, I think to start off with, to hit up some of the news from the week, and really it's surrounding Joe Burrow because, we're contractually obligated hosting a Bengals podcast to give Joe Burrow updates. I love that we've gone from contract and calf to just the calf to he's playing well. Is he playing like an MVP level? And now we're on to injury. So it just continues to have something going on, but we have to talk at least something about him. And it was that he had his surgery on Monday, and it was deemed a success, which is music to our ears.
Very good. Good job, surgery team, over at wherever in the heck he got his surgery at. I have no idea where it happened.
I did find it interesting that I read that I think it might have been in the Bengals statement, or it was someone else, or maybe it was Ian Rappaport or one of the guys, said he had an afternoon surgery. Which I was kind of like, that's interesting because as Mick, we were talking, I think it was you that was saying how, when you go into surgery, you usually can't eat. You're really not supposed to drink. So you think Joe Burrow would be the kind of guy that would want like the 7 a.m. surgery so he could get it done. And let's be real, if there's one man that has those strings to pull and would get the 7 a.m. surgery, it would be Joe Burrow. But instead, he has it in the afternoon. I don't know. Does that mean anything? Of course not. But I did just find that at least somewhat interesting.
I kind of agree with the way you went about it because, like, for me, I'd have more problems. Like, I'm typically eating during like later in the day, so like if it's a 12-hour window, it's I would think it's better just because your 12-hour window starts at 3 a.m, and then you just don't have to eat anything until you're done with your surgery or whatever. I feel like that'd be easier to pull off than not eating from like 7 p.m. until you go to bed, right? Like, I don't know. But yeah, it is odd that it's an afternoon surgery.
And again, I don't know. It doesn't mean anything. Of course not. The other big news of the week came on, I think it was Monday as well. The Bengals came out and they apparently gave the NFL hours upon hours of footage that apparently proves that Joe Burrow was not hurt prior to, which I know, Mick, we talked about at length over these last couple of weeks. We talked about it multiple times. I think that whole story is a load of bull. I don't blame the NFL for checking it, because you got to check it. And then also, like I've said too, is how can you prove really either side, but really how can you prove that he was hurt beforehand unless he's walking around the facility in a sling or something. But apparently all of this just showed him practicing normally. So I think it's a story much ado about nothing.
I hope they sent the footage to Dave Portnoy as well, just to show how much of a jackass he was being.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to say that word, right? I say it anyways.
Yeah, but, I mean, you said, am I allowed to say that word after you've already said it? And I don't have a bleep button, nor do we have an opportunity to dump it. So
yeah, who cares?
It's too late now.
Anyways, yeah, I hope they sent the footage to Portnoy. We've said this from the beginning. We don't think the organization was doing anything malicious with in regards to the sprained wrist or not the sprained wrist, but the wristband, the brace he was wearing. And yeah, I mean, we pretty much believed everything that they were saying. There's been a lot of fan backlash too on this. I can't tell you how many posts I've seen on the Who Dey Nation page where, they're just, they think the Bengals ownership just has such bad intent with the stuff. And like you said, they never really had, they wouldn't have a single reason to not disclose the injury if there actually was one. I mean, that would have provided no benefit to them. So I'm glad they sent the footage, and probably the easiest investigation the NFL has ever had to do.
You would imagine so. And I'm glad, like you said, it's done, it's over, and hopefully we don't have to listen to it much of anymore. And we can move on to him starting to beginning his rehab and be ready for OTAs or training camp or whatever it is. And if anything, just wrap the man in bubble wrap and tell him we'll see you week 1, wherever that might be. I think more than likely it'll be at home this coming, in 2024, but just like whatever it takes to make sure you are fully healthy, having a good training camp, play whatever preseason you want, and we'll see you week 1, because that's the most important thing, to have a 100% healthy Joe Burrow on week 1 of the brand new season in 2024, because expectations will obviously be extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's most of the news per se from the week, except for the game on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers, in which Cincinnati Bengals lost 16-10. It was not a fun football game to watch, but yet, wildly enough, Mick, was not the worst game of the weekend as far as watching bad football, as Monday Night Football probably takes the cake on that for Bears-Vikings. But it was ugly. And we hear a lot of Steeler fans talking about it. They won, and don't get me wrong, they did win the game and so on, but it was just ugly on both sides.
Yeah, rain game. I bet that had a little bit of a factor to do with it. The Steelers offense had no problems moving the ball. They just had issues scoring. There was either 1 or 2 red zone turnovers on the Steelers offense that the Bengals forced. And they just couldn't get in the end zone other than the Najee touchdown. So, the Bengals did a good job of playing their game on defense. They'll just give up a ton of yardage, and the opposing offense doesn't really have much to show for it. But yeah, ugly game on the offense for sure. Jake Browning, getting some Jake Browning conversation here.
Yeah, because I think you're a lot harder on Jake Browning from what we were talking about before we came on than I think is necessarily deserved in my eyes.
So I don't think Jake Browning had a very good game. Looking back at it, we kind of noted there's one thing that Joe Burrow obviously. Well, there's multiple things, but there's one thing that Joe Burrow has a clear advantage over Jake Browning. It's pre-snap reads and getting the ball out quickly. You saw Jake kind of holding on to the ball a decent amount. Now the stat line, the basic stat line looks fine. 22 of 28 or whatever. 220 passing yards, touchdown and interception, somewhere around that stat line. That looks pretty good, but he had, other than the interception, he had 2 plays that should have been picked off that not Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, just pulls a Houdini or pulls a rabbit out of his hat, and it's a batted ball, but he ends up catching it, and in both catches went for pretty good yardage. But it just wasn't a very good game for Browning. I wasn't expecting much out of him in the first place. I would say that the game was probably as expected. So,
yeah, and I mean, I think Tim says a good point here. Jake's not Joe. I mean,
yeah.
There's no question
There's
about
not
that.
Much to say about it. I agree.
Yeah. If you wondered why the Bengals paid Joe Burrow $275 million, just watch Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. There's your example, because I think, without question, Joe Burrow plays that game, the Cincinnati Bengals win. I 100% believe that they will win that football game, because he would make more throws and so on, and would have a little bit better of the pocket presence. That I think Jake Browning gave up some more sacks than normal. But I think really, when you look at it, is that Jake Browning, that one huge mistake he made, the interception, he doesn't make that. And I know we could, if ifs or fists and all of that, Bengals might win the football game. And I think we're looking at this performance a whole lot differently, especially if he would have thrown for another touchdown and he would have gone for 240 and 2 touchdowns. I feel like fans would have felt a lot different. But obviously, hindsight's 2020, and he did throw the interception, which has to be counted in. That's why I don't know that he played necessarily bad. I think, we usually do the good, the bad, and the ugly. I feel like he would be in that mid-tier, but I don't think it was necessarily ugly. And then also, you got to think that the man has played a game and a half of football and arguably played 2 of the better defenses. The Steelers' defense is not quite as good as the Ravens, but it's still a very good pass rush, with TJ Watt and then Highsmith on the other side. And the interior held up pretty well against the, Ogunjobi and Hayward.
Mm-hmm.
But still, you're going up against a good defensive line, decent corners. Joey Porter had a pretty decent game. And that's why I'm okay with the way Jake Browning played.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't disappoint me. I didn't think he was all that great, but I mean, I don't know. Kept the team in the game. It's not like he made too many crucial mistakes, but I don't know. Offense couldn't get it going. Run offense was putrid, really bad.
Yeah, I think we can go there.
Let's start with that. That was,
and I mean, it wasn't a ton of attempts, but my philosophy is what Joe Mixon, 8 attempts for 16 yards, or 9 attempts for 18 yards, or it was putrid. I think is the only word to describe what it was. And regardless, it doesn't matter really if it's 8 for 16 or 9 for 18. Both of those are awful.
It shows me it's a bad game from Joe in particular, because if you look at the run blocking grades, other than Jonah, everybody on the offensive line graded fairly well, 60, 68 and above. Now Jonah was tasked with TJ Watt. TJ Watt is pretty good at football, so he had a tough assignment there. But the fact that everybody in the line, or 4/5 of the line, was fairly good in run blocking is telling me that Joe Mixon was having a problem seeing the right holes and in doing what he could do to take some of the weight off of Browning's shoulders there.
I see this comment a lot too from fans after the game. And Tim, I'm not trying to pick on you by any means, because you are a large group of fans feel this way. Didn't help we ran the ball 8 freaking times, is what Tim says writing in. Thanks for the comment though, Tim. We do appreciate it. Yeah. Here's my philosophy with it, is it's like, it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And it's not like it was one of those things that you were seeing, oh, he's just like, I think you think back to that, and it just always comes to my mind, the Raiders game in 2021, where it was clear they kept running it and weren't having a lot of success, but you could tell it was just one of those things that it was going to work at some point. Mm-hmm. But I didn't watch that game and feel like, man, Joe Mixon is one cut away from breaking it. It just was not working. Now, is that all on Mixon? I don't think we can put it all on Mixon. I know you mentioned that PFF graded the Bengals offensive line pretty decent in run blocking. Now, part of that can probably be put in that it was a small sample size,
Yeah.
in those
that's true.
only those 8 attempts. But that's why I just think, like, now was Jake Browning, throwing dimes all over the field and, dicing up the Steelers defense? No, of course not. But I think that the pass was having more success than those 8 attempts for Joe Mixon. That's at least my philosophy when it comes to that.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on it because you bring up that Raiders game. Like, maybe if the Bengals focused on running the ball a little more, they would have actually, like, they would have broken a few runs out or whatever, or Mixon would have started finding holes and hitting them hard, the way that we've seen him hit earlier in the year. So I'm kind of torn on it, especially with the situation at quarterback. I feel like you got to try to put as much pressure off of him as you can. And, they said they were going to run the same game plan as they do for Joe Burrow. And it looks like they pretty much tried to do that. But, everybody knows Jake Browning's not Joe Burrow.
As Tim said, Jake is not Joe.
Jake is not Joe. So the fact that, they're trying to use the same game plan, that's on Zach for him to figure out what's going to give my offense the best chance of success. And if you think making Jake Browning throw for 75% of the snaps that the offense has is going to give you success, I just don't know where I don't see any logic in that.
Now, one of the things that if you have a backup quarterback in the game that you're wanting to rely more on is your defense. And the defense, I think it was 56 straight games the Steelers hadn't had 400 yards of offense. It was something like that. And they broke that with Kenny freaking Pickett on Sunday. That to me is the concerning part. And I get this, the whole bend and don't break. Yes, they gave up only 16 points. And in the long run, that's all that matters. And yes, there is some truth to that. But there were some moments in that game that, getting that stop on third down would have given Jake Browning the ball back, maybe given him some good field position, and you never really know what could have happened. So I think I just wanted to dive into a deeper conversation here from this game on this aspect, because I think it can tie in really well with the Steelers game on the defensive struggles. And because I think, we asked the question here about, is this a long-term issue for the Bengals? And
how long-term are we talking?
Long-term, I think long-term means beyond this season. Is because, you're seeing some issues in here that I don't know. I just like, is it a concern for the rest of the season? Without question. Without question, I think it is a concern for the rest of the season. But then you also look and you're like, okay, so how is it going to get better next year?
Yeah. So I get the question and I get the concern of a lot of people. I think it will get better. I think that from 2020 to actually, when did Vaughn come to the team? 2019 or 2020? 2020.
I think it was 20. I think it was a 3-year deal he signed. In fact, yes, it was 20 because he signed on my birthday. I remember March the 25th of 2020 because I was broadcasting a funeral when it happened. Happy birthday. That's a story for another day.
21 and 22, you had a starting safety duo that had a good amount of report from their season in 2020. Both players were in the league for a decent amount of time, 4 or 5 years of experience, and both of them leave in the offseason. And, you've had some attrition back there with Nick Scott playing the way he's played and eventually getting benched. And you've got this very young safety duo that hasn't had much playing experience together in regular season NFL, game time. They've just now became a starting duo at safety with Battle and Hill. Battle actually played pretty decent, I think. Yeah, I think he's been a good young spark on the offense. But you're dealing with 2 new safeties. And if I remember, was Jesse the green dot when he was here?
No, I think it's always been Logan. It's been Logan Wilson.
Has it always been Logan? I thought Jesse
I'm
was
pretty
the green
sure.
dot at one
Pretty
point.
sure it's been Logan Wilson.
Maybe Jesse was kind of the green dot for the secondary, if I had to guess, because I think the secondary, they somewhat do their own thing. Not saying they don't, listen to whatever Logan's doing or whatever, but I think Jesse had some, say in what the coverage was, how the coverage was going to go, on any given play. So you're losing that. You lost that veteran leadership in Jesse Bates. And you can tell the linebacking coverage has suffered from it too. Jermaine Pratt, who's usually been one of the better cover linebackers in the league, has been getting torched, all year this year, especially from opposing tight ends when, it seems like they're just, the linebackers are playing too far up and the safeties are playing too far back, or Mike Hilton's playing too far back. And you're just hitting dimes to Fryer, not even dimes, just wide open 20-yard passes to Freiermuth for the entire game, or Dalton Schultz, or George Kittle, or whoever. So yeah, I'm kind of torn because I think it'll get better, because I think the safety duo is young and there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think they could get there. But also, I'm starting to wonder if Lou's scheme is somewhat getting exploited a little bit, or if he's playing too soft of zone coverage and they need to start incorporating some more man-to-man, or incorporating more blitzes and more stunts. I'm torn. I think it'll get better, but I just think this year is just, we kind of said there might be some growing pains, right? With some of the turnovers. So
I think, Tim brings up this point. He says the defense was on the field for 37 minutes. What do you all think is going to happen? And listen, I don't disagree with that.
I agree with
don't
that, 100%.
But at the same time, who deserves some of the blame for being on the field for 37 minutes? Now, yes, the offense does, but that's the defense as well. If I was good at my job, I would have pulled a percentage on Sunday, but I'm sure it was really high, because the third down defense for the Bengals on Sunday was atrocious. So a lot of that goes towards, that's on you, defense, because, third down turns into fourth down and you're giving the ball over. So, that's one of those stats that you got to see both sides on it, that I think, blame goes to the offense, but it's not like the defense is blameless when it comes into that.
Yeah, and then one thing, just in terms of a lack of cohesion amongst Zach as the head coach and Lou as the defense, it's like, or as a defensive coordinator, is that on the offense, I can't tell you how many times we've had 4th and 4, and they've gone for it a few times. But there's been a lot of times where they've had it, let's say 4th and 4 or less, in between the 40s, and they're taking a delay of game penalty, and they're going to play the field position game at the punt. But the field position game doesn't work if you're giving up chunk plays down the field. And yeah, maybe the opposing offense isn't scoring, but you're just flipping field position. They're just going to flip field position the other way. And then you're just back with bad field position potentially on offense. So I don't know. I've kind of took a note of that today. I'm just like, what's the overall game plan here? Because if you're bend but don't break, but you're sacrificing field position, and then you're not going for it on fourth down when it's short distance and you're at a good field position in order to do so. I just don't get it.
I have some stats.
Okay.
You want some Bengals defense stats here? These are in really no particular order. Some of them are positive towards the defense, and some of them are negative, including one or two that kind of surprised me. Teams this year are scoring on 38.5% of the drives against the Bengals defense. It's the 7th worst in the NFL.
Okay.
At the same time, the Bengals rank 4th in turnover percentage. So that's percentage of drives that end in a turnover. So you're seeing like two completely different ends of the spectrum when it comes to that. This is an interesting stat for you. Quarterback knockdown percentage. So this is on a drop back where the ball is thrown. Percentage of times the quarterback ends up on his backside. Bengals, 11.4%. That ranks... do you have a guess where that ranks in the league? 11.4%.
Bottom half.
That's second.
Oh, is that really second in the league?
Trailing only Cleveland, who I think an argument could be made might have the best pass rush in the NFL with the best pass rusher in the NFL in Myles Garrett on one side. I don't think that we can argue that. I mean, well, I guess you could maybe make an argument for Micah Parsons, but I think Myles Garrett, if you ask me, I could have one defender on the Bengals, I think I'd take Myles Garrett just because he is.
Oh, I'd take Myles Garrett in a heartbeat. That guy's awesome.
Here's an interesting stat for you, Mick, because it's been something that we've talked a lot about as being one of the main reasons as to why the defense has struggled so much. And it's been missed tackles.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you think the Bengals rank in the NFL in missed tackles?
They've got to be like bottom 5.
Tied for 8th fewest.
Really? Well,
and that for me, that was one of those stats that was like, what? How is that like? And I mean, it came from a valuable source, so it's accurate when it comes to that. And then I got 2 more here for you, and these are we'll go this one. Well, we'll start here. Third down defense. That's what I talked about here just a few minutes ago. 44.2% of the time, opposing teams are converting on third downs. That's 5th worst in the NFL. 5th worst in that category. On the other side, in stats that don't make sense, the Bengals' 4th down defense is the best in the NFL. They're allowing only 2 out of every 8 conversions on 4th down. Now, that can be a little misleading because 8 is, I think it's the 3rd fewest attempts on 4th down. But that's just kind of one of those weird, because you're thinking 4th down is usually short yardage situations like you touched on a few minutes ago. You know, usually it's 4th and 4 or less. Bengals 2 for 8, the defense. That's 25% is almost 10 percentage points ahead of the next highest. And then I got one more stat for you here on the Bengals defense. And this is kind of leading towards that bend but don't break philosophy. The Bengals defense is 3rd worst in yards per drive. And that is your epitome of bend but don't break. Now,
Yes,
do these stats, I think, and I think Tim actually brings up a good point, is I think this defense statistically is kind of in a twilight zone because you see a lot of good, you see a lot of bad, and yet they've put out so inconsistent long term.
This tells me everything that I've been saying the past 3 months. It's kind of confirming that the issues are in coverage, and I think the issues are in the middle of the field. It goes back to the safety duo, right? You're saying, oh, they are number 2 in pass rush QB knockdowns. Well, pass rush is getting home. That's not a problem.
But that's also a little bit of a and that's where I kind of wanted to go. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to loop back to that. Is I can't tell whether that's a good percentage or a bad percentage, because QB knockdown can be a good thing, but it also can tell me that the Bengals are just a little bit late in getting to the quarterback on getting the sack.
I agree with that, and I'm not saying it's wrong. They're either late or the coverage just giving up an open receiver way too early. It's one of those two things. They're number 2 in QB knockdowns, and what are they in sacks? They can't be that high in sacks, or
middle of the road.
So okay, so you're seeing a variance in ranking there from number 2 to number 16. So yeah, that could say either the coverage is giving up somebody early or they're not getting the quarterback in time. And I feel like we see that quite a bit with Bengals pass rushes in recent years. It seems like, you remember Carl Lawson, he led the league in pressures or in tackle or in QB hits or whatever in 2019, but only had he didn't have that many sacks that year. Mm-hmm. What, 7, maybe 8?
He got paid because of it, though.
He did get paid because of it. I'm not saying he shouldn't have, but that either tells me the coverage is not playing well, which, based off of grading, based off of what I've just seen with my 2 eyes, especially in the middle of the field with, Wilson's been okay, but Pratt's been a mess this year in coverage. Nick Scott obviously is probably the worst cover defensive back in the NFL that's started this
Tell
year.
us how you really feel.
You've got Dax Hill, who's been pretty hit or miss this year, and it's not like he's had one of those elite coming out games that we've seen from a Jesse Bates. Yeah, you're just seeing a lot of inexperience and a lack of skill. A lack of skill that you aren't accustomed to seeing from that position group the past few years. And like I said, how much of this is going to be growing pains? How much of it is, do we have a problem? And then Lou's got to adapt to scheme too. Sorry to cut you off there.
No. And that's kind of what I was exactly going to say is I think the only people that can answer that question are sitting right now at Paycor Stadium.
Yeah.
Because those are the questions that even, this season, and we've said it here, if we're being completely honest with us, you're pretty much just taking the white flag and you're waving it. This team's not winning the Super Bowl. This team, if they make the playoffs, they're going to have to get really lucky to get that. And if they do, they're probably going to be the 7th seed. That's just, we're just being flat out honest. We're taking off our fan shirt and hat. Does that mean that we're not fans? No, of course not. They're going to struggle, as they should. They just lost one of the best players in the NFL as their starting quarterback. And they also have a lot more injuries that we're going to get to here in a few minutes that have started to add up on both sides of the ball as well. But in the offseason, I think there's going to be a lot of, they're going to have to look in the mirror when it comes to this defense because they're going to have some decisions to make on the defense. You've got some contracts coming up. You've got some corners that you could potentially re-sign. You've got some interior defensive linemen that you could potentially re-sign. What are you going to do with the secondary? Are you really going to put all your faith in Jordan Battle and Dax Hill next season? Or are you going to try and bring in a veteran to join into that room? I don't know. Those are the questions. And luckily, we've got plenty of months to discuss this. And I know we're going to dedicate pretty much an entire show to this defense and how like decisions like DJ Reader and Chidobe Awuzie. For me, I think one decision is I would lean towards coming back. And I don't think with Cheeto, just based on this, I don't think there's any scenario where he's back next year.
No, I mean, I don't see a reason why he would be back either. I think you drafted DJ Turner this year to kind of be Cheeto's replacement. Cheeto's been a great, he's been a really good, solid player for most of his career, and he's had some good games this year and then some really awful games. That's kind of what you come to expect coming off a torn ACL from a corner. So. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Cheeto's going to be back. He's also probably in his late 20s or maybe even early 30s. The Bengals don't typically like to extend people that are hitting that age mark for good reasons. So,
especially on defense and skill positions.
Yes. I don't think they'll ever do it again for people that's not Joe Burrow, just because of how much of bad luck they had with the Geno and Carlos Dunlap second extensions, 5 or 6 years ago.
Absolutely. And Tim, hey, keep the comments up, man. We appreciate the comments. Absolutely. Yeah, no, you're good. Cause I agree. I think right now on the defense, and we're going to dive into this because frankly, we got more to talk about this week as well, is I think he's the clear one that you're bringing back on the defense. And I think there's a lot of questions when it comes to the other one. I wanted to really quick, Mick, talk because we are running a little bit short on time because we got to talk about the Jaguars game coming up on Monday as well. But we've been seeing it pop up a lot over these last couple of days, the Zach Taylor stat without Joe Burrow. When it's 4-28-1 or whatever it is, regardless.
I don't think that's even right because they've only had one tie, and that's when Joe Burrow was starting.
Yes, you are correct.
So you are correct because they did not tie. Where the hell did they get this win-loss record? Because the 4's right. Actually, the 4's right. The 4 is right, but it's definitely not 28. That's way too many. That's way too many. You had 14 in 2019, and then 2-7 or 2-6 after Joe Burrow got hurt. And
technically he doesn't get a loss in the Baltimore game. Like that one technically goes on Joe Burrow's plate.
Yes, it does. So 4-21 I mean, it's still not
Okay.
good, but
But
it's not 428-1.
It's not good. But here's my thing with it. And I know I've made this comment plenty of times, and I'm not going to get on my high horse and rant about it because I've said it enough. Look, and I think I say this almost every single podcast, is Zach Taylor the greatest coach of all time? Of course not. I mean, he's not. Is he what some people say he is? No, he's not. And I think that is it's accurate. It just drives me crazy, and I think it's almost a lazy excuse for some people to make when they point to it. Because let's just talk about it this way. Okay, the 2019 Bengals, he goes 2-14. He had Andy Dalton and old man AJ Green with an atrocious defense.
Oh, he didn't even have AJ Green that year, by the way. He had a turf toe injury.
Correct.
Did not play.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. That's right. Good point. He had that. So he had Andy Dalton and, Ryan Finley as starting quarterbacks. And then let's be real. That season gave us Joe Burrow. Okay, let's go to 2020. You've got a rookie quarterback starting to build up.
COVID. Don't forget about COVID either.
Yes. Yeah. Good point there.
Hampered.
Yeah. So you have a rookie quarterback literally learning on the job. No preseason. He's literally learning on the job. You started to see them start to really figure things out. Bang, ACL. He's out for the season. And you're starting Ryan Finley and Brandon Allen as your starting quarterbacks. And honestly, in a lot of ways, tank, you get Jamar Chase. Okay. 2021, Burrow's healthy the whole year. He makes it to the Super Bowl. Great. 2022, Burrow's healthy all year. He's a couple plays away from making it back to the Super Bowl. This year, started off a little slow. Why? Burrow's hurt. Starts to come back in and do that. Now, I know that can, to some people, they're seeing this as, well, yes, all this pro goes to Joe Burrow. It should be Joe Burrow's, gets all of this. And don't get me wrong. He deserves a lot of the credit. But just to say that, it just to me is just so lazy for people when they just blame it all on Zach Taylor. I don't know, Mick. It's just like, is he a perfect coach? No. Is he as bad as a lot of people say? Absolutely not. And I think that stat is a little bit lazy because I know I saw one list of here's Zach Taylor's record without Joe Burrow versus Marvin Lewis's without Andy Dalton and Carson Palmer. Okay. I think you could make an argument that probably Marvin Lewis had better backup quarterbacks in both of those situations. But then at the bottom of that, it had the stat that means the most, that Zach Taylor shatters Marvin Lewis. Both of those coaches have coached 7 playoff games.
Yep.
Zach Taylor is 5-2. Marvin Lewis is 0-7 as a Cincinnati Bengal coach. And this is not me trying to crap on Marvin Lewis, but that to me is the stat that matters the most. Does Joe Burrow get a lot of the credit for that? Yes. But you can't just say it's all on Joe Burrow. I think Zach Taylor deserves a lot of that credit, and I'll get off my high horse, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm indifferent on Zach. I think he's an okay coach. I would, if we're gonna give a credit percentage here, I'd give 70% Joe Burrow, or maybe 60% Joe, 40% Zach, just because of how good Joe Burrow is. And yeah, I mean, you've heard me have my complaints about Zach. I think he's okay, but I do have legitimate worries about in the big thing. There's 2 things I'm worried about with Zach Taylor. Number one is we have yet to see a decent offensive line in his 5-year stint here as the Bengals head coach. You kind of saw it in the back half of 2022 before Lyle went down and then Jonah went down and then Kappa went down. You kind of saw a clip. You saw it click a little bit. Yeah. You saw it click a little. Hey, we got a playoff win even with all those other guys. Two playoff wins.
And almost beat the Chiefs with Jackson Carman.
Yeah. So, you did see the offensive line start to click, which was which was refreshing to see. But by all accounts, like the offensive line should have only gotten better, with the offseason addition they made with Orlando Brown Jr. and you're keeping Jonah Williams on the line and, all that other stuff. I mean, and you've seen the offensive line do nothing but regress. And
I think that'll be a question that we'll have to we're going to literally, we almost might take a show in January or February and dedicate it as the offensive line show. And I'd almost love to, because Mick, neither one of us would admit to being an expert on offensive line play in the NFL. I'd love to get somebody, and we might have to go through and find somebody who, I'm just using Willie Anderson as an example. I don't know that we're cool enough to pull Willie Anderson, but I'd love to sit there and talk to somebody who has played offensive line in the NFL to see if they can draw comparisons as to what really is the problem. How much of this goes towards the offensive scheme? How much of this goes towards the fact that maybe Frank Pollock hasn't done a great job? How much of this just goes to the fact that maybe they're just not very good as far as just pure skill level, and you can only polish a turd so much? And we probably don't have enough time to dive fully into those questions right now. But those are all of these questions that are going to keep being asked week after week. And I think they get exposed even more when you have a quarterback like Jake Browning playing instead of a quarterback like Joe Burrow playing.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just the big thing I have with Zach. I feel like Joe Burrow is, provides a little bit of a concealer factor to, legitimate scheme problems that Zach may have. You have Joe Burrow in there, it kind of goes away because of how good and talented he is. And then just the one thing I want to be cautious of. I'm not saying fire Zach after this year.
Because he's not going to.
They're not going to. And also, like, it's one bad year, and it's a bad season. You came off 2 really good years. So you're not firing him. But I do want to be wary about getting into that Marvin level of complacency if we're a few years down the line or another season down the line and we're, left with some form of disappointment. And because I wouldn't say 22 and 21 were disappointments by any means. But if you're having another disappointing year in 2024, are you looking at potentially moving on from it?
Those are questions we can have over the next couple of years. But I think it's interesting because, you mentioned 2021. If I would have told you the day that the Cincinnati Bengals drafted Jamar Chase that they would be playing for the Super Bowl 9 months later, I think you would have called me crazy. And that's, I think, the point that it is the best way to do it. Let's talk Jags. On Monday Night Football, the Cincinnati Bengals take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Good old Joe Buck and Troy Aikman going to be on the call. It's a white Bengal game. The white helmets come back out. Bengals haven't lost with the white helmets. Maybe it'll continue some of that luck there, but then they hadn't lost in their orange and black combination with the new jerseys either. So maybe they're just going to keep breaking those trends there. Let's start with this, Mick. I've got the big question for you. I don't know if you're ready for this because I didn't tell you. So there is going to be a Manning cast on Monday. Typically, with Peyton and Eli, typically they like to get somebody who is connected with the team somehow, whether it's a fan, a former player, or so on, of each of the two teams that are playing. Make your prediction. Who will be the Bengals representative on the Manning cast? Because if they win, I'll probably go back and watch it. If they lose, I don't. I think there's an obvious number one candidate, but I don't know that he's guaranteed to do it.
You thinking Chad?
Chad's probably the most obvious one.
I feel like Chad shows a loyalty to Shannon, though. And I don't know. Shannon's and so I don't know if he'd be the ESPN guy. Maybe Carson. You think Carson might
There's
be?
There's no way in HE double hockey stick that they're going to put Carson Palmer is the Bengals representative. My goodness, I will
trying to think of colleagues.
I will drive to Denver and smack Peyton Manning if he puts Carson Palmer as the Bengals representative during the game.
You got to think of like colleagues of these guys too. Like I'm thinking of guys that played in the NFL around the same time as Peyton and Eli that are, not really, they're retired and they were like well-known Bengal names. I mean, who else? I can't even really think of.
I don't know. And really, we don't need to just.
TJ might be on there.
It might be.
TJ's made media apperances. I mean, that'd be all right.
I think he does some Fox work though, so I don't know if that would cause some issues.
But
regardless, it doesn't matter. You're official for Monday night's game. Did you want to guess, or do you just want to know who it is?
Just tell me who it is.
Scott Novak will be the Bengals official on Monday evening. Do you know who Scott Novak is?
He's a referee in the NFL.
Look at you go. Hot takes galore. Bengals 1-3 in games Scott Novak has done. The one win is the 2020 win against the Titans, which was a good win, if you remember back. That was kind of that first moment, like I was talking about, that you really saw Burrow break out, and you're thinking, okay, yes, we've got that
game. That is the game where I learned to never bet against the Bengals, when you're actually betting money.
Losses at the Ravens last year versus the Browns in 2021 and versus the Ravens in 2019. Those are the stats there for Scott Novak, 1-3. The injury report will not be released until tomorrow, so we don't really have anything to actually bring you when it comes to that. For the Bengals, I know that Zach Taylor spoke earlier this week. Logan Wilson suffered an ankle injury on Sunday against the Steelers. I know Zach Taylor pretty much said he's a little optimistic that he could play, but that's still kind of up in the air. CTB and T. Higgins, he pretty much said both could return this week, but I think you're going to learn tomorrow. If either one of them are limited, I think you'll see them play. If neither one practices, you're not seeing them play on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least my philosophy when it comes to this. Into the game specifically, Bengals offense against the Jags defense. Here's a couple of stats for you, Mick. The Jaguars, and if for those watching, you might say that this is not a great way to talk about a defense and how good they are, but I actually think it's kind of an underrated stat to look at how talented a defense is. Jaguars give up top 5 in fantasy points to quarterbacks and wide receivers, which you chuckle, but when you think about it, it's not an awful way to grade how a defense has been playing. Not awful. It means that you're giving up yards and touchdowns.
You know what this kind of tells me, though, is that the Jaguars' offense is fairly decent, and teams have to, and they get up heavy on teams. So the opposing team is just passing the ball and trying to get back into the game the majority
because they are the third fewest in the NFL when it comes to running back fantasy points. Yep. They're good against the run. Pass rush, I mean, Josh Allen is a great pass rusher. Go Cats. But 8th fewest sacks, 5th worst sack percentage in the NFL. That has to at least make you feel good if you're wearing, or I guess you're not wearing orange and black on Monday, if you're wearing white and black on Monday. That to me is what stands out the most about the Bengals offense going up against this Jaguars defense. That is a lot of young talent.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with the pass rush. They definitely have not graded very well. I think they're bottom quarter of the league in terms of PFF grading. And it seems like they're kind of lacking unless if it's Josh Allen. Now I think their coverage is pretty decent. They've got a pretty good cover duo linebacker in Foye Oluokun and Devin Lloyd. Both have looked pretty good in that area. Darius Williams is having the best year of his career at corner.
I thought you just said Darius Phillips for a reason, and I had bad flashbacks.
No, Darius, it's O-U-S at the end. Mm-hmm. Williams. I think he was from Denver, if I remember correctly. But anyways,
yes, I think you're right.
He's having a pretty good year as their starting corner. Rayshon Jenkins has been pretty decent in safety as well as Andre Sisco. So I think their coverage is decent. But yeah, I mean, the offensive line for the Bengals has been pretty bad this season, so it's kind of nice to know that they're not going to have to deal with as ferocious of a pass rush this week as they've had in the past 2 weeks. So,
looking at the Bengals defense against the Jaguars offense, I mean, you've got Trevor Lawrence, one of the best young quarterbacks. You've got Etienne, who's having a really good season for the Jaguars. Ridley, is this but to me, the guy that might scare me the most because the Bengals can't guard tight ends is Evan Ingram.
Yeah.
Because I don't know who guards him. Who covers Evan Ingram?
And this is where we've kind of, did we have Trey Flowers last year? Or
we did. Trey Flowers, yes. And they let him go. He's now with the Falcons.
Trey Flowers. He's with the Falcons now. Correct. We're missing our tight end specialist. I don't know who's been the tight end specialist this year. If it's been Mike Hilton, that might be why.
Dax Hill. I think you've seen him drop down and cover some tight ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I guess the question I ask you, Mick, is can they slow down that offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think, are we talking about in terms of yardage or points?
However you want to take that. I
think they'll give up a ton of yardage, but I think they'll do what they always do. Bend but don't break. They'll I don't see the Jaguars just running up the scoreboard in this game, I guess. Especially you've got Hubbard back. Hendrickson's kind of still on the mend a little bit. Hopefully those two get closer back to 100% health. Those are two big things. Yeah, and I think their offensive line isn't. I don't think the Jaguars' offensive line is that great, especially up the middle with your Kentucky alum at center, Luke Fortner, hasn't been that great. So I think DJ could have a really good game as well. I don't know. I think it's going to be a closer game, and I think they definitely covered the spread of 8 points.
Looking at special teams, you ready for special team stat, Mick?
Mm-hmm.
The Bengals are one of the worst teams in the NFL in opposing field goal percentage, which again means absolutely nothing. Here's this stat, though, blows my mind. Opposing teams this year are 22 of 23 on field goals and 22 of 23 on extra points against the Bengals. They've only missed 2 kicks. That's 44 of 46 on kicks against the Bengals this year.
I mean, if you kind of notice though, like when they're kicking field goals, this is where the bend but don't break really hurts. Is that they're not breaking? They're not breaking until the other team reaches like the 15-20 yard line, and those are chip shots in the NFL.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing. I more just found that.
Is there an average distance to kick stat there? Do you know?
Not that I have in my prep work. If it was there, it didn't process in my mind because I feel like I would have written that down. So I'm sure it's something that could be found. I mean, obviously, you could just go look at the game books and see the 23 field goals and
just
put them in
do the averages yourself. Yeah,
exactly. But ain't nobody got time for that right now. The game itself, as we mentioned, it's on ESPN. Buck and Aikman, White Bengal. Overall, though, is there anything about the Jaguars you think needs to be mentioned before you jump into your keys?
No. I think I'm just ready to jump into the keys here.
Your keys to victory.
Keys to victory. Offense. The Jaguars don't have the greatest run defense in the world, and the Bengals are trotting out Jake Browning. And no disrespect on Jake Browning here. He's coming in. He's doing his job. He's playing. But if you're going up against a run D that's not that great, maybe run the ball a little more. And Mixon needs to actually have a good game where he has good vision. Where we've said in the past that he either has really good vision and he's hitting holes at a good consistent basis, or he's just literal trash and he's just running straight into defenders.
Tell us how you really feel.
We need a good game for Mixon here. And given that he had a really bad game against the Steelers, I'm liking his odds here. Defense, going to sound like a broken record again, but pass rush, the Jaguars' offensive line isn't that great. You've got one pretty good tackle in is that Cameron Irving or is that a different name I'm looking for?
Robinson, isn't it?
Cam Robinson, that's his name. Cam Robinson. It's funny. So Cam Robinson and Anton Harrison are their starting tackles. Cam Robinson is really good in pass blocking, but awful against the run or against in run defense. And then it's the exact opposite, I think, for Anton Harrison. So
everyone's favorite mock draft offensive lineman, Anton Harrison. That's what you mean for the Bengals. Remember, he was the guy that always came up as like the second round pick in everybody's mock draft on PF, because when you do the PFF, it's like the same 5 players and people just always see, ooh, offensive lineman, I'll take him.
Are we talking, say, second round or first round?
He kind of started off in the first and then dropped down into the first. I think he ended up being a first round pick, but I think it was
before the Bengals even got there. Yeah, I mean,
but I'm talking about the PFF, how everyone would do the PFF mock drafts. And he would be somebody that would be available in the first 2 rounds, and you would just see him up on the list every single time. But that's just whenever I think of Anton Harrison.
This is why when you mock draft people, do not just pick the Bengals in mock draft, because the simulation aspect of that is nonsensical, I think.
Now, see, what I love to do is I love to turn up the randomness all the way. And there was a draft a couple of years ago where I got Jamar Chase. I got Penei Sewell. I got another really good quarterback. It was just funny. I was like, I think I picked Penei Sewell in the 6th round. It's like, well, my goodness, if he's still here in the 6th, I guess I got to take him.
Do you think that's what Bill Belichick does when he actually drafts? He just turns up the randomness on his own draft pick, and then he ends up with Cole Strange from Chattanooga or Kyle Duggar, who has actually been pretty decent. He loves the small school guys. Anyways, not to get off topic here. Anton Harrison. Let's make some predictions here.
Let's make some picks here for the Bengals and Jaguars on Monday Night Football. They're in good old Jacksonville, and a lot of fans are making the trip down. I know it was something that we had talked about, Mick, and it didn't end up working out. And
I'm glad it did not, because this would have been
we would have had a good time.
Yes.
But it would have been a little bit sad. There's no question about that. Mick, who you got? Bengals, Jags.
I'm going to go Jaguars 21, Bengals 17.
I guess, well, not really similar. Jaguars 23, Bengals 10.
Okay.
Is my pick. So I'm picking the Jags to cover those 8 points. I don't think I would bet it, but I do think that the Jags will cover and the Bengals will lose yet another road primetime game, bringing it to whatever it is now. It's a lot. Is it 16? I think this will be the 16th straight road primetime game that the Bengals have lost in the regular season, or some wild number like that.
It'll get broken eventually. We had to wait 30 plus years for a playoff win. So
I hope it's not 30 years.
But yeah, it shouldn't be as hard to get, but it'll happen eventually. We'll get it. It'll be all right.
We'll be back a week from today, breaking down this Jaguars game and also previewing Colts next Sunday. That'll be a 1:00 game. So we'll be back every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media channels. You can also follow us on our podcast platform, on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify, on Apple, on all of the different ones that we have. I know, Mick, they released your Spotify Unwrapped or whatever they call that. I'm sure if you've been on social media, you've seen it today because everybody thinks that people care about what it is. I did find it funny that Jungle Juice was number 5 on my listen to podcasts. On
what was your number 1 in artist and podcasts? Let's
I don't remember artists, but podcasts. It was Hear That Podcast Growling. Shout out to Paul Daner.
Okay, they were
that was my number 1. I listened to like 6,000 minutes. I was in like the top 1% of that podcast, meaning that I listened to every single episode of that. And then my number 2 was the other podcast that I do. So.
Oh, there you go.
Because I like to sound check and air check myself. But
I find myself listening to the Jungle Juice podcast sometimes to just see like Man, did I sound like an idiot or I didn't? It's more of the former.
Yeah,
But
it's called air checking.
yeah.
There you go.
PFF NFL podcast #1 for me, and then Denzel Curry #1 artist, if you know who that is.
I do not. So that doesn't.
It's pretty
that
good.
doesn't
He's a
bring
good
anything.
rapper.
That doesn't bring anything to me. All right, that'll wrap us up though for this week. We'll be back a week from today as the Bengals hopefully will win against the Jags, and we can. In fact, Mick, I think the last time we both picked them to lose, they won. So I think it was the 49ers. So maybe that's just what we need to do. And they'll be able to pick up the win on Monday against the Jaguars. So until next time, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. We'll drop it off with a Who Dey.
Who Dey. Thanks for watching.